All right, so let's talk about the data point group customization. Now, what this means is that you have another way on how you can customize the data points besides the default option. And this option allows you to define how exactly certain data points are going to look like, even though everything else is controlled through the defaults tab. In order to do this, there are a few things you need to have to prepare in order to make it work. First of all, when you open up the fields list of the visual, you're going to scroll down and find this data point groups. And here, you need to make sure you have a data point group sort of categorization that allows the visual to understand how many groups are going to be there. And for this, make sure that you look at the description we have provided also here and use the necessary naming convention. So group 1, group 2, group 3, and so forth. This is the way and how we have currently coded it. If you're going to be using something else, the visual is just not going to recognize it. The way it works afterwards is if you go into the formatting options right here, it's going to scroll down, you can see we have two different groups. If I remove the grouping mechanism from the field, go back to the formatting options, you can see I don't have those groups anymore. So that grouping allows the visual to understand, okay, certain elements are going to be customized differently. So I'm just going to put the groups back, go back into the formatting options, and let's say, for example, data point group 1, I'm going to enable it. You can see that by default, there's very slight distinguishment between the customization. For example, the only difference currently is some of the nodes have an outline and some of them don't, because on the default tab, I have set out an outline. So unless you have changed anything or you're just using a default chart, there's not going to be any difference whatsoever. But once I activate it, I can start to customize this particular group. And I'm going to say that instead of using a dynamic shape, which is coming through the data, all of the data points are going to be circles. Okay, for this particular group, I'm not going to be using an image. So I'm just going to be disabling it. The color mode, I don't really care about the defined colors. I'm going to have one single color, and that's going to be, for example, this purple. So you can just play around with certain settings and see how this allows you to emphasize on certain data points or data point groups. On top of that, you can, of course, define the outlines, the labels, their placements, the values, whether you have some decimals or not. So this just truly allows you to customize certain groups of the data points rather than just everything all together. You can also define whether this is going to be using the same category as a label or if it's going to be using a different principle. Just make sure that whenever you are using data point groups, first of all, you use the correct naming convention, and second, make sure you enable it. Because by default, even though it's recognized by the visual, unless you enable it and customize it, there's not going to be any difference.